Hi, everyone, and welcome to our discussion and case study on Newlab's Return to Work pilot. I'm Alexandra Bacchus, and I'm part of the Newlab Partnerships team. Many of you might be familiar with our work at Newlab, but others may be encountering us for the first time today. Thanks for joining us. If you learn one thing about Newlab during this discussion, I hope it's the way we're committed to applying transformative technology to things that matter. That mission is taking on a whole new meaning during this pandemic. Newlab is home to a growing community of entrepreneurs, inventors, and engineers. We support over 150 companies made up of 800 individuals working across tech domains like robotics, materials science, connected systems, additive manufacturing, quantum computing, AI, and more. We also work with government agencies, Fortune 500 companies, and researchers, and we're deeply invested in multidisciplinary collaboration and bringing an entrepreneurial, civic, and ethical lens to the advancement of technology. Today, we'll be discussing a case study for Newlab's Return to Work pilot that allowed us to safely and quickly open our facilities back up using cutting-edge technologies provided by our network of startups. Our CEO, Sean Stewart, and our startup partners will be discussing the new realities of daily operations and how we balance member feedback and privacy concerns with health and safety guidelines as more companies return. A few housekeeping notes before I hand it over to Sean. Our panelists are looking to field questions from the audience, so feel free. To ask a question, please type it out in the chat box and I'll help get those in front of our panelists. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to you, Sean.
Thanks so much, Alexandra, and happy birthday. Sorry you're running a webinar on your birthday, but we appreciate the time.
Thank you.
So thanks all for joining us and appreciate the panelists' time. I know you're all busy with some pretty important efforts. I thought for our audience to start with, I'd like to just set the stage of the building we're talking about. You've heard about Newlab and what our community does, but it's important to understand the physical space that we're going to be discussing today and the return to work strategy deployed to bring people back here in a safe and efficient manner. So this is the Newlab building that you see in front of you. It's an 85,000 square foot facility across 4 levels that includes multiple bathrooms, conference rooms, a large event space, multiple labs across 3D printing, product realization, wood shops, metal shops, electric benches, and textiles labs, and a range of other facilities that the community uses day to day. As Alexandra mentioned, our community is over 800 entrepreneurs building 150 different companies and applying transformative technologies to things that we all feel matter in regards to the progress of society overall. So this space that you see today was one that we had to consider in regards to bringing people back in a safe and responsible manner. The common spaces people use day to day, the conference rooms and office spaces. These common spaces you see today can be shared amongst various companies and workers. Many of them have dedicated desks that you see here across the common spaces, but they also have private offices like the one you're seeing here that the Jump team operates from, developing electric pedal assist bikes. Some of the labs include our electric benches like you see here, wood shops and metal shops that different members have to utilize on a daily basis. And the reason why we had a community of ongoing team members coming here day to day, despite the lockdown that occurred in March, was that we had a range of efforts ongoing that were deemed essential under the city and state guidelines. Some of these included the Spiro Wave effort to develop ventilators in a short period of time, or ventilator alternatives for New York City hospitals. Applied XL is one of the companies based here that came out of our venture studio. They developed a COVID-19 tracker to help provide data on county preparedness, as well as cases and death metrics on a daily basis. And we also worked with the team at Bednark developing face shields for New York City hospitals and frontline workers across a sprint period of time. And so the result was across our community, although there's 800 people here typically and 150 plus different companies, was that there were 22 businesses that were deemed essential, covering about 85 different employees who needed to access the Newlab space on a daily basis throughout March, April, May, and into June. And so what we were presented with as a leadership team was this interesting challenge. How do we provide the facilities and resources needed for essential businesses within our community and those COVID-19 related efforts, but doing so in a safe and responsible manner that doesn't put the health of them, their families, and the society around us at risk? And so that's what we're here today to talk about. There's 3 major stakeholders that we introduced at the start. Mike is here from StrongArm, the CTO of StrongArm Technologies. And we're going to talk a little about their sensor and the product they developed, as well as the pivot customization they did to bring it to be helpful in our COVID-19 return to work strategy. We also have Alexander Winter here from Norbert Health. Alexander has been a founder of multiple companies in the computer vision field, and Norbert Health has developed medical pod monitors for remotely monitoring the health of people in spaces, whether it's residents or businesses, including heart rate and temperature measurement from a distance. And so Alex is here to join with us to talk about how they customize their technology to help open up our workspace in a responsible manner. And then Max Holt is here, the CEO and founder of Launcher. Launcher is developing one of the world's most efficient rockets to deliver small cube satellites into orbit, anywhere of the size of a Rubik's Cube up to a box of cereal. And Max has been one of the essential businesses, and his team have been here since March, working on a range of important government contracts. And as a result, he's here to share perspective on what it's been like being here day to day and continuing to motivate his team, continue to have a productive workforce, but do so in a way that gives them confidence their health is not at risk. So I thank all the panelists and everyone for joining us. We can stop the screen share now and then actually get started with the questions. So Darrell, I'd love to start with you. You're Newlab's Director of Operations, Time and Space. And the first challenge that came to you was how to open up the building and reconfigure the spaces, the conference rooms, and what changes needed to happen to allow people to come here day to day in the COVID-19 world. So can you give us some perspective and insight into exactly what had to happen before we get into advanced technologies? What space changes needed to be reconfigured? What operational plans needed to be updated to begin this process?
Yes, absolutely, Sean. So we really started thinking about returning to work right after the New York State pause went in order. We first were worried about how are we going to put our team so that they could work remotely, but then quickly began thinking about how do we bring people back when the right time came. We wanted to understand how to bring the community back to work safely as soon as we were able to. And as you mentioned, that opportunity came early for us when New York State granted us essential business designation so that we could continue working on COVID-19 efforts like the emergency ventilator, manufacturing face shields, and also supporting Newlab companies that were making a positive contribution to COVID-19. That timing coincided with StrongArm seeing the opportunity to repurpose their platform. And we saw a very strong value proposition in that because we did make a lot of changes to the physical space, like you explained, densifying the building, figuring out how we could distance desk, even what was the right type of disinfectant that we had to use every day. But really, we could make all those physical changes to the plan, but helping our community keep a safe distance from each other was really key and important for us. We felt that it would be difficult for folks to continue to have a constant awareness that they had to work at a distance from one another, and we needed a solution for that and found it in StrongArm. You guys will elaborate later. So we jumped aboard together. We began collaborating on the overall plan and with a focus on fast execution because we wanted to get feedback from the community early and collaborate on evolving the product. So that's how we went about kind of creating the original operations plan. But a key piece to this was really becoming aware about policies that were emerging overnight. Spent a lot of time just reading and keeping up with a wave of emerging policies and guidelines from the CDC, OSHA, the state, the federal government, so that we could understand the best practices involved in bringing people back to work safely, covering anything, again, from social distancing to the type of products we would use in the building for disinfecting. Those of you who are in the audience right now who work in HR or facilities or property management might sympathize with that, right? And having to, just take all that information in and make it actionable. The knowledge that we gained in that process allowed us also to inform important aspects of product development, which you guys will talk about. But for example, what temperature thresholds we would be using to permit people to come into the building, what period of time an exposure report should cover, for example, in the event of an infection, or for how long two people would have to interact before they were considered a close contact to each other. At the end, what we ended up with was a very comprehensive plan to allow folks to enter in the building, starting with a health declaration before they came in so that we could assess who was fit to come into the building, then conducting screenings at the front of the building by a certified EMT who could say, hey, you know, this person is able to come in based on a temperature threshold or not, and then working with StrongArm just so that we could facilitate that social distancing piece that you guys will discuss.
Got it. Okay, so I wake up every morning and I fill out a questionnaire that takes my details about how I'm feeling, whether I'm feeling good or bad, whether I have a cough, whether I've been near anyone who's tested positive for COVID-19, whether I've traveled abroad. Then I get to the building. It sounds like I have my temperature taken with a contactless thermometer, and that assesses whether I can enter the property. Then when I enter the building, I get fitted with this sensor, which I have on here. And so you can see it's kind of the size of one of those old Nokia flip phones that you could drive over with your car and it would still operate. And I have this on a daily basis. Now, Mike, what's the history behind the sensor I have on every day? What was it originally designed for? And then how did you pivot or alter this product for COVID-19? And what are the benefits? Why am I wearing this now?
Yeah, definitely. First off, thanks for putting together this awesome webinar. I'm very excited to share some details about this and the work that we've been doing with Newlab. So at StrongArm Technologies, we created a wearable, a sensor, if you will, that's, to your point, nearly indestructible like the old Nokia phones. But originally what we do is we work in the industrial environments to help manual laborers or blue-collar workers, people we call industrial athletes. We want to keep them proud, protected, productive, and eliminate all workplace-related injuries. So that included things like ergonomic issues, so lower back injuries due to lifting improperly, or heat stress, or being exposed to loud noises that might affect your hearing. So that's what we were doing, working with companies like Walmart and Toyota in the warehousing, distribution, manufacturing spaces. So that's the environment we work in. And the sensor was really programmed to figure out what are the intrinsic and extrinsic factors that might lead to a workplace injury. And amidst the pandemic, and as it was starting out, what we started having a lot of conversations with existing and prospective customers. We started to realize that this is impacting our customers in ways that we were not aware of, and to the scale that I think surprised all of us. So, you know, our mantra internally has always been to focus on the problem and not the solution. And when we've heard this coming up as a continuous pattern of, hey, we got to focus on this issue. This is an issue we need to focus on. We basically got the team together and said, all right, you know, our focus is to keep these people safe. What do we need to do today? And doing a little bit of research and figuring out what the problem is, this contact tracing and social distancing aspect seem to be the most critical part of getting people back to work, and also when you're in work, how do you keep people safe? So our sensor has a Bluetooth radio chip inside, and it seemed to be one of the starting points in how we can potentially understand that distance. And we're very familiar with providing alerts or feedback when there's an unsafe action that happens, or an alert to let people know that they've been exposed to something that they shouldn't, like heat stress. We said, how can we translate our learnings and our benefits and apply that to social distancing? And I think that's basically how this came to fruition in partnership with Newlab.
Got it. So the first thing this does then is anytime I come within 6 feet of someone, it's going to vibrate or give me an alert, some type of haptic feedback. Is that correct? To alert me to my distancing?
Exactly. So we're using Bluetooth to understand that distance, and following the CDC guidelines, if you're within 6 feet for more than 10 seconds, this will start giving you a visual alert. And if you're still within 6 feet after these initial alerts, within a minute or so, you'll start getting vibrational alerts to give you that awareness, to remind you, oh wait, you know, this is actually much closer than we should be, so that people would then, you know, practice social distancing properly.
Got it. And so if I'm here at work all day today, I go home tonight, I obviously don't take the sensor home with me, but I wake up in the morning and I do have a temperature, I have a sore throat, and I'm slightly concerned I might have come down with something. Darrell, how does this sensor then help you with the contact tracing? What insights do you get because I've been wearing this, and how is it positive in regards to the actions you would need to take once someone has actually been seen as having symptoms in the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So two things. One is through StrongArm, we get a daily report. So we're able to understand how many checkouts we had in a day, what interaction looks like. And the threshold that the CDC has set is 15 minutes. So if you are interacting with someone for more than 15 minutes at a time, the risk of infection increases. So those are the variables that we look at. In the case of individual cases, right? So if someone reported, if we had a positive case within the community, then we would be able to see how many people that person interacted within 48 hours, which again is the mandate from the CDC. And then we would be able then to reach out to those folks and then let them know that they have come into contact with someone who tested positive for COVID, and that they need to go into a quarantine period. And the process is just so easy, and we have been collaborating very closely with StrongArm to get the report to a point where we feel comfortable with it. And we just began now to run a couple of dry run scenarios. So what happens in the event that someone in the community does become infected? The other piece is that, of course, after that, we have to follow other protocols, like figuring out where do we go to disinfect areas where that person may have been. But the key here is contact tracing, right? Being able to identify those folks that the person came into contact with for more than 15 minutes, so that then we can preserve the health and safety of the overall community.
Got it. And so then, Mike, if I'm an employee wearing this, I work for Newlab, I don't work for StrongArm. Should I be concerned that I'm being tracked in regards to how long I took my lunch break, whether I had a cigarette outside for half an hour? What are the privacy concerns you're hearing from people who wear a sensor like this? And what concern or what comfort can you give people that this won't be used in inappropriate kind of manner?
Absolutely. I think that's a concern that we faced from day one with some of our industrial partners, as you would imagine, and getting their workforce to put on a device that may seem like a tracker in many ways. One of the things is that our focus has been on the safety of people, and our data reflects that. So we don't reflect or report on anything that is outside of the realm of safety. So we actually don't care if you're going to the bathroom 10 times a day or going out for a cigarette break. We don't capture that kind of information, nor do we care, and we don't report on that stuff, period. We also have a clause and a mutual understanding in our contracting with customers and also with Newlab that this information will not be used in any sort of punitive way. And I think what most people would start thinking is like, oh, that's the first thing that they think about is you're tracking people, you're going to use it in a punitive way. What organizations realize is when you start using safety data as a hammer for punitive action, you're almost shooting yourself in the foot, and the program loses its legs and you'll have no buy-in. So safety is an interesting beast in the sense that it is actually a mutual benefit across both the organization and the individual and across an industry that a lot of this is avoided. We've not had issues with customers thus far, but it is also contractually obligated that if there's any issue with punitive action that we terminate the agreement immediately.
Got it. And so then I assume, Darrell, you mentioned people having their temperatures taken at the door. Then if people come in at the same time, you're starting to form lines and obviously density of people as they enter the building. So Alexander, I'd love to hear about kind of the technology developed at Norbert Health, what its original intent was, and then how it's been customized or pivoted towards COVID-19 and how it helps with some of those kind of choke points in the operations overall.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. First of all, let me start with something. I really miss Newlab. I mean, I really miss the office, and it's an amazing place. And that's why I was really motivated to, help Newlab set things up, just like Mike, right? And get that amazing place back into real life, into what it was before COVID, and it's getting there. So really excited about that. So about Norbert. Norbert was developed originally as a home medical pod that will keep track of your health at home, right? And so it's measuring essential vital signs like heart rate variability, temperature, breathing rates, breathing depth. We can safely and accurately measure vascular, cardiac, and breathing activity and temperature using a combination of sensors. The unique aspect of what we do is that it's not a wearable. You can put it on a bookshelf somewhere in your house. It's going to monitor your vital signs throughout the house. That's throughout the room where it's in, sorry. And it's going to also understand movement, sleep quality, and things like that throughout the house, because we leverage radar technology that goes through walls. Basically, it's like leveraging Wi-Fi microwaves, for example. But we use that for sort of imaging and understanding of activity instead of transferring data. Basically, that's how it works.
Got it.
So 2 months ago, our focus was the the most frail part of our population, which is elderly people who live home alone. Right, there's 12 million of them in the U.S. Most of them have chronic conditions. They all have a pretty high risk of falling, and the original target was, let's solve the stress and worries of most families who have an elderly parent who lives home alone by having that device that will keep tab on their health and detect any rapid change in health condition or detect falls, and just let them know that the activity is as usual and everything is fine.
Mm.
So, so then 2 months ago, we moved to a different new world, and all of a sudden, everybody, the whole population became at risk, And the idea of monitoring your health to detect early signs of infection, to signal to you that you're in trouble, but also make sure you're not going to spread the virus, became something that applied to the whole population and that spread outside of the home. So so that's when we started thinking about using our device to implement these kind of use cases, like monitoring the health at at the office, the workplace, to make sure that we're rebuilding office environment that are safe and still fun to be at. So of course, privacy is very important. I mean, we can talk about that later, but lots of constraint. I mean, essentially, what you want to measure, and the sensor is the same, be it in an office environment or home environment. What you do with the data is very different, right? If you buy a sensor for your home, then you want to look at your data, you want to have access to it. If you have a sensor in an office environment, you want to make sure that the right amount of data is shared with the people who run the office or who are your employers. So that would be the main difference.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. And so then you have this experience, everyone's coming to the Newlab community, they're filling out their health vitals, they're getting to the door, they're taking their temperature, they're being equipped with a sensor to do contact tracing and provide feedback on distancing. There's a Norbert Health sensor that can also take their vitals from a distance in addition to calibrate with the manually taken temperatures. Max, I'm curious, all of this, how does your employee base react to this? Are they terrified of all of this monitoring? Does this give them comfort? How did you as a CEO kind of maintain comfort and a feeling of responsibility of your employees with this program?
Well, what's really interesting is we went through a different phase that gave us a lot of contrast to share. So the first phase is when the lockdown happened in New York City. We were clearly, because of our contract with the Air Force, deemed as essential. So we had this period where we basically were on our own. Newlab kindly provided access, but obviously none of these procedures and tools were in place. And this is, I guess, sometime in March. And so we were able to come back with our small team to work, but everything was on me as an entrepreneur, on me and the team to discuss what we would do, buying masks, buying disinfectant, putting procedures in place. And as you can imagine, we were trying to keep our contract work for the government going. And so we didn't have all the time to do what Darrell did and all the debate you had about the right temperature and so on to follow best practice. So it was a little DIY and, definitely didn't feel, there's always a feeling you could do more and so on. And, with COVID, you're really talking about risk minimization, right? We don't really, in procedures, there's no absolute answer, but everything you can do to be safer and less risk is better for everyone, all of our team members and their families. So that was the first phase. It was fine, but definitely something that always at the back of our head, are we doing the right thing and so on. Then Newlab announced the first cohort, which has been probably a month now, something like that. And with that came a lot of communication about all the procedures, and we as customers and tenants of the space and partners obviously of our host Newlab, we started to feel like a lot of things were planned and put in place for us. which were following best practice, but we didn't really have to come up with it. So that immediately made the team feel more comfortable. I could really see it. And it also made, you know, me as the leader and the person responsible feel a lot more comfortable that we would just, you know, this would be taken care of. So that was great. With that, we had to sign an agreement in terms of the data policy to do with the sensor. Certainly no pushback. I think everybody understands that, you know, there's a lot of trust going on at Newlab between all the companies, and you know, no issue there. And we understand that it's for the good, and it's for us as well as the StrongArm and the community. And then the experience started, which is, as you mentioned, it's great, right? We arrive, we fill in a questionnaire, it takes 1 minute, you know, sometimes you forget, you stay outside the door, it's a Google form. We wear masks, you know, policy that I'm right now in a meeting room that used to be for 4 people, it's now for 1 person, and I guess we're allowed to not wear the mask inside, but as soon as we step out and go in our open office, we wear the mask 100% of the time. And then we get scanned and we check out our StrongArm sensor that we attach right here. And then we go about our business. And so there's many other things that Newlab has put in place. We see a lot of markings in the bathrooms for social distancing. There's coffee now. When we were on our own, there wasn't. And all the tools to clean our hands before and after. So basically, you know, it's as safe as it can be. And as you said, Newlab has procedure in case somebody in the building or outside the building is a confirmed case. And hopefully it doesn't get to that. But it would very, very much feel like best practice. And then the last point is on the sensor. You know, at first, you know, we didn't know a lot about the StrongArm sensor. A lot of unknown. Now we have to wear it like this, obviously, as we don't usually wear tools like this on our bodies. And so, you know, it was intriguing, kind of novel, but within a day, you know, it's just routine. Like, you know, no one, the only thing that can sometimes be a bit unusual is we have to explain if I'm on a video call, I forgot about it. And kind of explaining that I'm not playing a character in a movie or something like that. But other than that, it becomes, you know, completely invisible to us every day after a few days. And then I would describe it more as an additional sense. You know, social distancing is not a, you know, you try to do it 100%, but it's all about doing the best you can and improving the trend line, right? And it's for sure that with the vibration, you know, sometimes we have to do physical operations around some of our rocket engine in the workshop, and we might for a short amount of time be a bit too close to each other. But certainly feeling everybody's sensor is vibrating, you know, it's not like you just suddenly run away you know, but you definitely feel like, oh, I should stop this proximity as soon as I can. And it happens without language and without, you know, drama, but it just happens. It's like the distance between us is on average far greater than if we didn't have the sensor. So yeah, we're very thankful to be part of it, and you know, it's been a great experience so far.
Yeah, and so Darrell and Mike, the experience Max is talking about, does the data show that this is actually effective, that people have over time distanced more and actually taken the feedback and altered their behavior, or if the number of kind of alerts you're seeing on a daily basis just stayed the same?
Yes, for sure. We've seen a trend towards in the positive direction. In the beginning, so one of the metrics that we look at is on average, how many minutes people are interacting with each other every day. So those numbers at the beginning might, you know, jump in if I got the numbers wrong, but I think we're looking at something like 8 minutes on average, and now we're down to 2. At the same time, we're seeing that the number of interactions, so the length is going down, and then the number of interactions also every day, we see those numbers go down. I think it's important also to highlight one interesting point that Max brought up is that at the beginning, there was a little bit of apprehension about using the wearable, but then as other community members saw that others were wearing it, there was greater adoption. We have 73% adoption now. And that's helped too, right? The more people that are using the sensor in the community, then the better the data, and of course, the better the protection.
Got it. And Mike, what data do you provide to the CEOs of the companies here with their employees? Like, how do you help them manage their workforce to be responsible in their distancing approach?
Yeah, so the reporting is very similar to what we provide on the ergonomics and environmental data for employers, in the sense that we, first of all, don't show any sort of information that might be, you know, outside of the company. So like, we wouldn't share with Alex his team's data to Max. It's very much, if you're in Launcher or in Norbert Health, like, you get that specific data and no access to anyone else. And Darrell also gets kind of aggregate data in certain areas and then specific individuals where necessary. I would say that the alerting and whatnot is very similar, in that we see the first day, you know, from day 1 to day 2, there's about a 31% decrease in the number of alerts, so the less social interactions. And then by day 20, we've actually shown about 82% decrease in alerts as well. So people are starting to definitely recognize that these alerts are there to give them that awareness and that kind of tap in the shoulder when you don't even realize, like, oh, this is not within 6 feet. So I think in terms of the information, it really has just been providing Darrell and the teams that employ these different individuals just, how are you guys doing as a group in terms of participating in social distancing, and making sure that if there is something that you guys do and create some new controls around that, you're able to then see that data and see the effectiveness of how that's going. So I think from Newlab's perspective and what we've seen in the data, it's definitely trending in the positive direction, and we've definitely been very lucky to work with a group of very smart and capable individuals that have been giving us tremendous feedback around our product and the data and how we can improve it. And certainly Newlab has been a great grounds for us to develop this new product and try and figure out how to optimize it and apply it elsewhere.
Got it. And Darrell, you mentioned at the early set that you had to develop maximum occupancies for bathrooms, like no more than 3 people or 4 people in a bathroom. Obviously, that seems kind of difficult to know how many people are in a bathroom before you get in it. Like, once you're in there, then you could tell if it's crowded or not. Alex, did your technology assist with that problem? How can Norbert Health be involved with telling the occupancy of people in bathrooms, at the same time not obviously invading privacy in an area that people would be incredibly sensitive to any sort of camera equipment or anything else?
Yeah, the last thing you want is a camera in the bathroom, right? So, so our technology, that's a good hack of our technology, and it's exciting that following our collaboration that you actually came up with that idea of using the device to monitor how many people are in the bathroom. So we have a radar that's actually able to spot people. It's it doesn't create a human readable image basically, but it's just a sort of map of where and how many people are in a given area. So we can, and that radar actually can see through walls actually. So we can put it outside of the bathroom, and it would monitor what's happening inside the bathroom, basically just count how many people are in there. It's very accurate in the sense that it really detects people are actually in there right now. It's not like a in-out counter. Most occupancy counting devices are like that. You put them above the door and they count people in and out. So if you miss someone coming out, well, you'll have a wrong count for the whole day, right? So that device actually was going to work great for that. I mean, we need to do a couple of hacks to make it work in real life inside Newlab, but that's one of the things we're going to do in the near future. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because all companies in the world have that problem now,
Yeah.
And there's no scalable, easy solution for that. Just like, temperature and vital sign screening, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
There are solutions that were built more for like high security or places with high constraints. So it's typically like big kiosks that cost $30,000. And there's nothing that's easy to use. Most of these kiosks need to be managed by an operator. So, or the high-end infrared camera, it's the same thing. You need to have someone sitting by them. So but that doesn't work for most places, right? So our angle is really to provide a consumer-grade device because that's what we were building originally. So something super easy to set up, super easy to understand and interact with, that will do all that.
Got it.
We have a number of audience questions coming in actually right now. And on the topic of scalability, someone asked, how scalable is the StrongArm technology? Is it able to be utilized in wearables that individuals already have, such as Apple Watches?
Yeah, should we be typing in responses directly, or will we be?
I'll
No, we'll talk about it here.
Questions so that we can answer them live.
Definitely. In terms of the scalability, so unfortunately today the actual code, if you will, in the sensor is not something that you can just copy and paste and then create an app on an Apple Watch or cell phone yet. So it is designed to be most efficient with our sensors. It is something that we're thinking about and trying to help apply, but in terms of the experience and the technology constraints, there's actually a lot of difficulty in using it in different platforms like an iPhone versus an Android phone and the way the Bluetooth protocol works. So as of right now, it's the most efficient and scalable with this sensor, but we are definitely looking at other opportunities in tapping into other wearables. Granted, we can get through some of the technology implementation challenges there.
Got it. And there's been news about Google or Apple apps teaming up to develop contact tracing apps that would be on your phone. Max, from you leading a team, if you'd suggest them we're going to do contact tracing for an app on their cell phone versus a sensor they pick up when they enter and exit a building, what's the difference there? Is one going to be a better solution? You don't have to wear a sensor, your phone's in your pocket everywhere you go. Like what would be the reaction from your employee base of something that's more connected to a smartphone as an example?
I mean, before we tested the sensor, that was our first reaction, why isn't this an app or why isn't this, but now, I think the first that it's a dedicated device, forget the technicality for a second, but it's confined to the space. It's very visible, and an app, you don't really know when it stops and when it starts. So I think there's a little bit of inconvenience in wearing it and putting it on, but it's very quick. You forget about it. But the advantage is that it's very easy to control. Okay, I left it at Newlab, the tracking stops. The other piece is, somebody in the question said, hey, what does the sensor does? And to repeat that, so basically if you come in proximity within the 6 feet, it will detect another sensor, and you as the wearer starts to get a vibration, just like a mobile phone vibration, but a bit stronger, that also other people can hear, not just you feeling it. And so with a mobile phone, I guess you would have a lot of issue of, is it even on you, right? Did you just leave it on your desk? Is the vibration turned off? Can you really reliably track? GPS probably is not very accurate inside this building. So I think the segregation from your phone world is, I think, an important reason to have a dedicated device. And I think the implementation might not be very reliable. You might have to open the app and forget, and so it might be, even when they do get an app version of it, it might not be as effective.
Got it. And there's a lot of attendees on the calls who are entrepreneurs themselves, building companies. I'd love to hear from Alex and from Mike. Like, you're pivoting your product, you're adding new features. How do you decide when it's worthwhile to do so? You guys had a plan for Norbert Health. You had a plan for what StrongArm was designed for. Now you've suddenly forked off into a new direction. We can start with you, Alex. Like, how did you decide this was a worthwhile pivot, a worthwhile kind of feature set to go after? And how permanent is this? Is this like a 3 to 6 month thing and then you go back to your original vision? Or does this feel like a new definition of what Norbert Health is going to develop?
Yeah, that's a great question. And believe me, we had long conversations with my co-founders and my investors about that. And I mean, the kind of massive demand that's arising now is something you rarely see in industry, right? It's extremely rare. So if you're close to a massive wave like that, it would not make any sense not to leverage that, right? It's a massive demand that most companies need right now. We're also betting that, back to your point, that this will be there to stay, right? I mean, the fact that office spaces are places where different people are and exchange germs and viruses, is now at the forefront of people's minds, right? It used to be kind of there, right? You used to be the annoying guy in the office when you were saying, "Oh, that guy is coughing, you should go home," you know. Now people just know it's commonplace. So you'll have to integrate that into what office spaces and co-working spaces offer. You want to offer a healthy, safe place to work, right? So it's not going to be as intense as it is now, but it's going to be a staple of every office space from now on, right? So, so how do you make the decision to switch to that? I mean, it's you know, part of it is leap of faith, right? We believe that, you know, there's a mission side to it, right? I mean, this is where we think that we can really help make a difference. And even though, you know, we're also driven by, you know, profits, you know, we want to build a company that makes sense. And this is a massive problem of the world now that we need to address, and we want to be part of that. So part of it is that is really mission driven and leap of faith, and the rest is just, I mean, it's an opportunity, man. The number of inbound calls we're getting for to inquire about our ability to do a quick, you know, temperature check at the entrance of a building that's, you know, inexpensive, scalable, and also like pattern monitoring throughout the office. And there's two reasons for that, right? I mean, there's the regulatory reason, there's also the marketing reason, and the sort of, not marketing, but experience reason, right? Every shared office-based co-working space in the world now is worried that they'll go out of business if people don't go to the office anymore, right? Yeah. If every company does like Facebook and Twitter and allow, you know, remote working forever, what are they going to become, you know? Right. So it's, I don't think there was, we had a lot of conversation about how to do it, but I don't think we ever doubted that this was the right move.
Nice. And Mike, in the same area, like this piece of hardware obviously monitors far more than social distancing and contact tracing. It's telling me if I'm lifting heavy boxes inappropriately for my muscular or skeletal frame. Is this going to end up with a different, lighter weight product? Do you still need everything that's involved in this hardware I have on? And as you look to similar desires for contact tracing and social distancing feedback in offices and high rises and people just working in banks, and is there a new type of hardware that you have your eye set on, or is this just a feature that will continue to be within the existing product?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. So I think there's definitely a recognition that there's different applications for this technology and capability that goes beyond what it is today. So in terms of a different hardware embodiment and making it smaller and slimmer and more applicable to maybe, you know, we've had museums and sporting events and even the New York Stock Exchange trading floor, like people we've never even thought about helping, especially with this problem, reach out. And I think we have plans to think about how we can make a different hardware adaptation to enhance that experience. As Max noted, you know, you'll never get something more comfortable by putting something additionally on. So that's also a big part of the experience that we're thinking about, and we definitely have plans to apply different hardware for different applications.
Yeah, and there's a question on the side.
There's a great segue.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's a good segue there into a couple of different audience questions combined, but it's around the kind of suite of products that make this partnership possible, available for external use for other teams and businesses looking to do this, and intentions around commercializing this suite of products. So Sean, actually, you might be a good person to answer this as well as some of the other panelists.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like our studios always work with both corporate and government bodies to see how we can prototype technology, in this case regarding COVID-19 return to work strategies, but then also expand those pilots with the prototypes to more than just a single location. And so we've been in discussion with a range, as Mike mentioned, everything from museums in New York to office parks to factory floors to Wall Street and the trading floor. And so we introduced them to these companies. Obviously, if there's a specific interest in what Norbert's doing with bathrooms or vital sensors, if they're specifically interested in StrongArm, we can connect those teams. But if they're looking for the entire package of everything, then yes, we look at bringing them into the studio and launching the next location of this pilot in a new area. So it's actually one of the most exciting parts has been that because of our essential work here, we started earlier than most. So we've just got a lot more insights than many have as they start to consider. New York is only just beginning phase one of reopening businesses, yet we're in the 5th or 6th week of operating and have been able to get ahead of the understandings. And so now we're excited to see who we can partner with to expand the insights, bring more technology, but also learn in different environments with both Norbert Health involved and StrongArm involved as well. And so there was a good question there from Miguel on like, what's the time frame on implementing the StrongArm technology? And so Mike, from the time we called you and said, we need this, how long did it take to set this up at Newlab? And same for you, Alex, like what does this look like going into new environments? Is there a lot of heavy infrastructure and installation, or is this quite agile? Mike, we can start with you.
Yeah, well, technically, from the moment you guys called, we didn't actually have the product, so I guess
Yeah,
conception of it. But I think once we got the initial prototype ready, you know, it was really just like, hey, how do we connect to Wi-Fi or some internet interface at Newlab, and who are the list of participants? And I think, you know, we turned that around in about a day or two. I would say that Newlab is probably a bit of an edge case compared to some of the industrial companies, just because they have a bit more infrastructure and you know, hoops to jump through. And obviously Newlab is very agile and you know, in very much ways thinks and works like a startup like we do. So for us at Newlab, you know, it was less than 48 hours, I think, getting everything set up in place.
Got it. And Darrell, any of the insights to date in regards to different type of work environments? Like, is this just suited to a Newlab, or what would you give in regards to recommendations of what you've seen for different deployments in new workplaces?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that commercial building managers and employers are really trying to figure out how to bring their workforce back safely. And then there are areas that seem to be emerging as points of concerns for building managers and employers again, for which there aren't easy answers. So how do you conduct screenings quickly to prevent congregation and long lines in front of building entrances and lobbies? You definitely don't want your workforce to be waiting for 15 minutes or for the office to become the new airport where you have to wait for a long time. How do you help people maintain awareness? And Mike touched on that. That's key. I mean, where humans are wired to lose awareness, unfortunately, it's, you know, we don't necessarily know what 6 feet of distance mean. So helping people maintain that awareness throughout the day in the interest of safety is very important. And then the other piece is that now businesses that are reopening for phase 2 in New York are required to comply with a whole bunch of things. So we have to know every person who was in the building, and then also to be able to help with contact tracing. The reports that we're getting from StrongArm are helping us with that if we get to a point where we have to help with that effort. So I think, you know, Shannon, you said it right. We have been running the program now for over a month, and so we've learned a ton. And I think that we can help our colleagues across industries think about how to adopt these technologies and deploy them quickly in their workforce so that they can, in their workplaces, so that they can facilitate their return to work. So if there's anyone in the audience who's struggling to grapple with all of this, as we're only a couple of weeks away from a wider reopening for office spaces, let's be in touch. You know, we'd love to talk, we'd love to help out.
Got it.
Well, Darrell, there's another question in here about the concern of a virus remaining in a conference room. So, you know, Max is in a conference room right now, and then he's going to leave and go about his day. And so there's a question in the audience about what happens after a conference room is used while limiting the number of people helps with social distancing. Is something being done about air circulation, which is a very real problem for many like larger office buildings that have more confined spaces?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our HVAC system in the building is designed so that we have a lot of sources of fresh air units. So we just made sure before we got people back that we turn on all of those fresh air units so that we're able to have that intake into the building. In regards to the conference rooms, we have a cleaning and sanitation schedule so that the rooms are, you can see Max is showing there, rooms are clean on a cadence. But also, you know, there are kind of practices that we're going to help the community adopt. For example, if you're in a conference room and you're having a couple of people there, you might want to consider just keeping the door open. That's fresh air that can come in from outside. So it's not technical at all. It's mostly educational. And what we have in place is the signage and the kind of education that we need to help our community adopt those practices.
And there was a question in the chat around, Darrell, did you have to train your operations staff to take temperatures and vital signs, or did you go to a third party? Like, that seems like a lot of risk to put on employees to have them at the front lines taking temperatures.
Yes, absolutely. So that's one we thought about very carefully, and we decided to work with a third party because they're trained to do just that. So we are working with a company that provides us either EMTs or paramedics who are here in the building. So they are taking folks' temperatures with contactless thermometers. We're in conjunction working with Norbert Health there to take temperature. And then if there's someone who comes into the building with a fever of 100.4 Fahrenheit or above, which is what the CDC recommends, or the threshold that the CDC has set up, then the EMTs are trained to do additional screenings, right? You wanna, maybe that person was running on their way here, maybe they were exercising before, maybe it's not a true fever. So we have this staff on site who can tell us if this person really is not fit to be into the building and can help us make that decision. Then we take the communication over from there. But yes, absolutely. We decided to go with a third party, and we feel pretty confident about the decision that we made.
Got it. And then there was also an audience question on the 70 to 80% kind of adoption of using sensors. For that 20% population, how would you contact trace if one of them tested positive for COVID-19 as an example, and they didn't have a sensor on them?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are other ways we can do that. So first, we also have a log of every person who comes into the building because either a key card or guest registration is required. So we know when they were here. There are other things that we can do, like our security cameras, for example. We can kind of examine that information and that data to identify where those folks are at in the building. And then, of course, we can ask questions of the individual. Were there people that you interacted with within 48 hours? So then we can go back and do the additional tracing.
Got it. I keep jumping in on you, Alexandra. I'll let you answer these questions coming in. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, we're getting quite a few questions. This one is probably best suited for Mike. And so it's around how accurate is the sensor if someone is behind you. So given that Bluetooth has blind spots and that it's worn from the front of your chest, what should users be aware of in terms of the blind spots they should solve for?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the first things we looked into, is figuring out, how do you have that kind of 360 awareness? And the reality is that Bluetooth is imperfect. And I think any sort of radio frequency is imperfect in the sense that your human body is basically like a bag of water absorbing all the radio signals, so, which is partially the reason why we have the sensor using the harness and kind of oriented in a consistent way across every single person. So the sensor is basically, if you can think about almost like a sonar radio signal that goes out that is looking for that signal, it is facing outwards exactly in the orientation and travel of where the exposure is that you want to limit. So from the kind of in this general direction, it is very accurate in that sense. But if someone is behind you, the risk is slightly reduced, and it is not completely accurate. But we're really looking and focusing in that within 6 foot mark. So we will still get that data of there was a sign. It may not be as strong or as frequent, but because we're sampling at such a high rate, we're able to get a pretty good, accurate representation of who was around you regardless of orientation. So if you're moving very fast, you may miss that. But if someone's standing behind you in a room for more than even 10 seconds, we'll get that data points of like there might have been something there, it's just not as strong.
Great. And then this question here could be answered by quite a few people, but I think for Max, this question is about finding it difficult to enforce social distancing and PPE requirements in the space, and have we implemented any enforceable consequences? But I think this is also kind of a good way to ask, as members kind of move around unseen by Newlab staff and are interacting with each other, what has it been like kind of behind the scenes as members go off into their different corners of the space?
Well, I think in the pre-cohort, in the pre-Newlab procedure, you definitely could see some personal preference in some of the team members, and you know, sometimes I had to remind them or remind myself. But once you had these procedure that, you know, the mentality switch on as soon as you go through the door and the EMT scans you, and you wear this wearable. And then we're also not the only people in our team, but there's a lot of other people that are joining Newlab. And it just becomes like, you know, you don't want to be rude, and you're a professional, and suddenly everybody's complying all the time, as far as I can see. So we, you know, it's especially the mask, obviously. So, you know, it's, I think everybody wants the best, and I think it's natural behavior is trending really positively, that it's not an issue.
Amazing. We've got a couple minutes left, Alexander. Any last questions we want to get to?
There's one more, probably best suited for you or Darrell, Sean. What was the original capacity in Newlab, and what is it at now? What percentage of the capacity is present?
Darrell, do you want to tackle that?
Absolutely. So on average, we saw about, our building has a capacity for about 3,000 people. It's a massive 84,000 square feet facility. But on average, we would see about 400 people a day here. Now we're seeing more, 50 to 60 people of the 85 that are permitted to enter the building. So I hope that answers the question. But I think that, you know, as we're moving towards phase 2 reopening, that we're thinking about how to manage the capacity. The mandate from New York State is that the overall facility needs to be operating at 50%. So we're actually taking measures right now just to make sure that we're able to absorb that wave when we come in. We are lucky in the sense that we have a lot of space in the building. So we have been able to, for example, space desks from one another so that they're at 6 feet distance. We have been able to densify the areas where it makes sense. But yeah, 50% capacity overall is what we're aiming for that second wave of reopening.
Got it. And so there's been a bunch of interest in the chat of reaching out to ask more questions and learn about all the different technology developed. What's the best way for them to contact you, Darrell, or to learn more about these companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So Darrell at newlab.com, best way to get in touch with me. Any questions, I'm happy to help address. It's been, you know, really great for us to collaborate with our member community in putting this pilot together, having over a month of experience doing this. And so we're eager to share that out with our colleagues.
Amazing. Well, with that, I think we're at the end of our time and audience questions. So I'd just like to thank Mike and Max and Alex for all your time and for all of the work kind of adapting your technologies to be relevant to bringing people back in a safe and efficient manner. Thank you for Darrell for operating the entire space. 84,000 square feet sounds like a lot to deal with. And we certainly appreciate everyone for attending today.
Thank you, everyone.